So good afternoon, Congressman, and thank you for being with us. The American presidential elections are coming, so let's help us understand the polls. Firstly, according to the polls, these elections is going to be a close one. What would your assessment be on the election result?
Well, you're correct. It's going to be extremely close, we think, if the polls are correct. And sometimes the polls are not correct, but I think it's accurate to say it'll be a close election. The margins will be slim, maybe not in the national popular vote across the entire country, but in the key swing states, as they call them, it appears to be very, very close. The margins are thin. So on election night, we may not know the result yet. It may take a few days. It may take longer than that, which is why one of the things I always say to people is you have to have some patience. Don't try to get to the result right away on election night. If it looks like it's going to be close, we have to reserve judgment. So we may be heading into that kind of an election.
Political and ideological polarization seems to be on the rise in the United States amid one of the most divisive elections in recent years. What would your feeling be? Worried, concerned?
Well, the country is very divided now, as you say, ideologically, but also I think driven by misinformation, disinformation that puts people into sort of different corners, and it makes it harder for them to reach across the aisle or reach across their communities and engage in constructive dialogue. So we're seeing that. It's not just a problem in the United States, but we do feel it here, this division ideologically. And this election, I think, in some ways is going to be a referendum on whether we can move forward as one country or whether we're going to continue to have this division within the country. So the stakes are extremely high in this election.
Let's talk about Kamala Harris. She seems quite reserved when it comes to foreign policy. If elected, what would you think your policy on Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean will look like?
I think a President Harris would bring a continuity, stability, thoughtfulness to her foreign policy broadly, and I would expect to see that in the case of Greece and Cyprus and the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, she has been vice president for the last 4 years, so she has some good experience on the global stage, if you will, the international stage. So I think her foreign policy, again, will be one that's stable. It won't be theater. It won't be erratic, which I worry could be the case if former President Trump is reelected. And I think with respect to Greece and Cyprus, we would continue to see very strong relationship there. As you know, over the last few years, that relationship has become quite strong and steady, and we're very excited about that.
Has you made up your mind on who will she be nominating as a Secretary of State? Do you have information?
I have no inside information about that, but again, in a Harris administration, I think you'll be looking for somebody who has experience in foreign policy, has relationships around the globe. That's very important, that kind of experience, and brings that kind of thoughtful, steady leadership. I think U.S. leadership is respected when people feel that it's collaborative and constructive, and we're sitting at the table together making important decisions.
If Donald Trump wins the elections, are you concerned about his policy on Greece and Cyprus, Congressman?
I don't yet exactly know what his policy would be on Greece and Cyprus. You can argue that regardless of whether we've had a Republican or a Democratic administration over the last, decade and a half, the relationship with Greece has been growing and strengthening. So I would hope that we would see that in the case of a Trump administration. But it's hard to predict what that will look like. Again, I think President Trump is more into the theater of foreign policy and sort of the bombastic approach to it. That makes me a little bit nervous. But I think with respect to Greece and Cyprus, you do see bipartisan commitment. Certainly in Congress, I can I can indicate that we've had very strong bipartisan support for the strong relationship and alliance between the United States and Greece and Cyprus.
US-Turkey relations underwent several ups and downs over the last 4 years. What is Kamala Harris' view on Turkey? If elected, do you reckon she will be attempting to mend US-Turkey relations?
I would expect that she would be receptive to strengthening that relationship, but at the same time, she'll be wary of it and careful about it. We've seen that President Erdogan is very sort of provocative in the way he conducts his foreign policy. And often the United States, I think, has been on the receiving end of that to our detriment. So I think if you look back over his record and you're a responsible, thoughtful policymaker, and certainly a President Harris would fall into that category, you're going to approach Turkey with extreme care.
It was on Trump's watch that Turkey was excluded from the F-35 program. Rumor has it, Congressman, that some Democrats are trying to find a way to get Ankara back to the F-35 program. Would you confirm it? Could you comment on that?
Well, I don't trade in rumors, and I don't know exactly where that information is coming from. Myself, I would be very concerned about that. So we'll see what comes of it. But again, I think when you're dealing with Turkey, you have to be very careful and wary, and you have to verify things every step of the way. I mean, obviously, I would like to see a Turkey acting constructively in the Eastern Mediterranean. I would like to see the temperature lowered in terms of the way Turkey has dealt with that region, dealt with Greece, dealt with Cyprus. So we're always looking for that opportunity, and we want to support that kind of constructive dialogue. But at the same time, we have to be clear-eyed about this, and Turkey has on many occasions given us reason to doubt whether they are genuine in their approach. So I think we have to bring that kind of lens to the situation.
Coming now to the F-16 sale, if Turkey reverts back to its revisionist behavior, will Congress reevaluate its stance on the sale, do you think?
I think when the sale was made, that members of Congress certainly recognized that if Turkey began to engage again in provocative behavior, particularly with overflights and these other things that they've been doing in the Eastern Mediterranean, that we would need to revisit it. What that would look like exactly will depend on what the conduct is that we're responding to, what the context is situationally at the time. But absolutely, if Turkey's not following through on its promises to us, then I think the United States needs to take a very hard look again at this. And you'll have members of Congress who I think will be in a position to do that.
Congressman, I have a personal question. Both your father and you have left your imprint in United States politics and have fought many battles defending Greek interests. Deciding not to seek re-election must have been difficult. Might I ask about the reason behind this?
It's pretty simple. I've spent 18 years now in elected office. When I came into the Congress, I didn't think it was going to be the last thing I did professionally. So I always thought there would be something else. And you get to an age and a stage where you think, if I'm going to try something new, I better get started on it. I do think that the interest that I've had, and I focused on civics and democracy, I focused on healthcare, I focused on the environment, and certainly I focused on the relationship between the United States and Greece and Cyprus. I'm going to continue to have those interests. I'm going to find ways, I hope, to make a contribution in all of those areas going forward. So it's not like I'm going to be disappearing from the scene. I'm just going to find other ways to participate.
Cyprus now, Congressman, judging from developments such as the launch of the strategic dialogue and the signing of the roadmap for defense cooperation, it now seems that the United States views Cyprus as a strategic partner. How will the strengthening of United States and Cyprus relations be affected by the outcome of the presidential elections?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. I think there's a high level of appreciation, and this is new over the last few years within the Congress, for how important Cyprus is, how critically located it is strategically, geopolitically, in terms of energy security. The list goes on and on. So there's a deep appreciation and recognition of that within the Congress, and I think among foreign policy experts in the administration and so forth. I would expect, because you have that commitment, and it's a commitment which is bipartisan, which is very important, that regardless of the outcome of the election, Cyprus will continue to be viewed as a critical strategic ally of the United States. No doubt in my mind. Again, I prefer one administration over the other, but I think Cyprus, Greece, the value that they bring to the United States, to our interests, is undeniable.
As a closing question, I would like to touch upon the UN efforts on Cyprus issue. Are you optimistic on the recent efforts to resume talks?
I'm always optimistic that the next round of conversations will produce something concrete. You know, we're always looking for what we call the confidence-building measures in this long-standing, I mean, we're talking now 50 years, right? We're at the 50th anniversary of the invasion and occupation of Cyprus by the Turks, and it's an occasion for us to redouble our efforts to try to find a solution, and to think carefully about how the United States and the United Nations and others who care deeply about resolving that situation can bring their own leverage to bear. So, yes, I'm optimistic. I'm also realistic, because we've been to these restarted conversations many times before. But there's always opportunity to try for something new and develop the conversation further. So hopefully that will happen.
Thank you for joining us, Congressman.
My pleasure.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.